Imagine ringing in the new year with the person you love, only to vanish into thin air before the first sunrise of January. In the wealthy, quiet suburb of Cohasset, Massachusetts, Anna Walshe, a successful executive and devoted mother of three, disappeared on New Year's Day, 2023. What started as a frantic search for a missing woman quickly spiraled into a gruesome investigation of digital breadcrumbs, blood-stained basements, and a husband whose internet history would become his own undoing. This is not just a story of a missing person. It is a timeline of a calculated, barbaric betrayal that left a family shattered and a community in mourning. Remember to comment, like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of the Calendar of Crime. Also coming soon to Substack. To understand the tragedy of Anna Walshe, we must first look at the woman she was. Anna was a 39-year-old powerhouse, a regional manager for the real estate firm Tishman Speyer. She split her time between her family home in Cohasset and an apartment in Washington, D.C. Friends described her as vibrant, ambitious, and deeply devoted to her three young sons. But while Anna was building a successful career, her husband, Brian Walshe, was entangled in a web of his own making. Brian was under house arrest, awaiting sentencing for a federal fraud case involving the sale of fake Andy Warhol paintings. The pressure of his legal battles, combined with the financial strain of his restitution, created a volatile environment behind the closed doors of their luxury home. The Warhol fraud case is a crucial chapter in understanding Brian Walshe's character. In 2016, Brian took two authentic Andy Warhol shadow paintings from a friend in South Korea, promising to sell them. Instead, he had them forged and sold the fakes on eBay for $80,000. This wasn't just a one-time mistake. It was a years-long, multi-layered scheme that involved misleading buyers and federal investigators. By the time Anna disappeared, Brian was facing 37 months in prison and a massive restitution bill. He was a man with his back against the wall, a man who had spent years perfecting the art of the lie. The final hours of 2022 seemed normal on the surface. Anna and Brian hosted a family friend for a New Year's Eve dinner. They laughed, shared a meal, and toasted to the future. But as the guests left and the house grew quiet, the atmosphere shifted. Prosecutors would later argue that Brian had already begun to suspect Anna was moving on. He had discovered her months-long affair with a man in D.C., William Fastow, and he feared that Anna was planning to take the children and start a new life, a life he could not be part of from his prison cell. In fact, Brian's suspicion had reached a fever pitch in the weeks leading up to the murder. He had his mother hire a private investigator to follow Anna in Washington, D.C. The investigator's findings confirmed his worst fears. Anna was indeed seeing someone else. William Fastow would later testify in court about their intimate relationship and Anna's growing concerns about Brian's mental state and his legal troubles. For Brian, the walls were closing in. He was losing his wife, his children, and his freedom. As the world celebrated the arrival of 2023, Brian Walshe was not sleeping. Instead, he was on his son's iPad, beginning a series of searches that would later haunt the courtroom. At 4:55 a.m. on January 1st, he searched, "How long before a body starts to smell?" 3 minutes later, "How to stop a body from decomposing?" Throughout the morning, the searches became increasingly specific and gruesome. 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to. How long for someone to be missing to inherit? And can you be charged with murder without a body? These were not the actions of a man whose wife had just left for a business trip. They were the blueprints of a killer. The timeline of the next 3 days is a chilling record of a man attempting to erase a human life. On January 2nd, while the world was recovering from New Year's celebrations, Brian was at a Home Depot in Rockland. Surveillance footage captured him wearing a surgical mask and gloves, purchasing $450 worth of cleaning supplies, including mops, buckets, and heavy-duty tarps. He also visited a CVS and a juice bar, attempting to create a normal routine while his wife's remains were allegedly still in their home. On January 3rd, the trail led to various trash transfer stations. Brian was seen on camera at apartment complexes in Swampscott and Abington, disposing of heavy trash bags. He was also seen at a dumpster near his mother's home. These were not his usual trash routes. He was traveling miles out of his way to ensure that whatever was in those bags would be lost in the massive machinery of the waste management system. The investigation took a dark turn when police finally entered the Walshe home on January 4th. In the basement, they discovered a blood-damaged knife and evidence of a hasty cleanup. But the most damning evidence was found miles away. Investigators combed through trash transfer stations in Peabody and Swampscott, where they recovered 10 trash bags filled with horrors. Inside were blood-stained rugs, a hacksaw, a hatchet, and a Tyvek suit. Forensic testing confirmed the presence of both Anna and Brian's DNA on these items. The forensic science involved in this case was a masterclass in modern investigation. Even though Anna's body was never found, the DNA evidence was irrefutable. Forensic scientists testified that the blood found on the hacksaw and the Tyvek suit was a perfect match for Anna Walshe. They also found Brian's DNA on the inside of the suit, proving he had worn it while handling the remains. The barbaric nature of the dismemberment, as described by the judge, was reconstructed through these small microscopic traces of life. During the trial in late 2025, the prosecution painted a picture of a man driven by greed, jealousy, and a desperate need for control. They called over 50 witnesses, including William Fastow, the private investigator, and the forensic experts. The defense tried to argue that Anna had died of natural causes, a sudden, unexplained death, and that Brian had simply panicked. They claimed he loved her and couldn't bear to lose her. But the jury wasn't buying it. The sheer volume of premeditated searches and the calculated disposal of her remains pointed to one conclusion: first-degree murder. The impact statements from Anna's friends and family were heartbreaking. They spoke of a woman who was a light in their lives, a mother who lived for her children, and a professional who was respected by all. They also spoke of the betrayal they felt from Brian, a man they had welcomed into their lives. The judge's sentencing remarks were equally powerful. She called Brian's acts barbaric and incomprehensible, noting that he had no regard for the lifelong mental harm he had inflicted on his 3 young sons. The psychological profile of Brian Walshe revealed a man with a long history of manipulation. From his art fraud case to his behavior during the search for Anna, he displayed a chilling lack of empathy. Even as he was sentenced to life in prison without parole, he maintained his innocence, a final act of defiance against the truth. For the 3 young boys left behind, the trauma is immeasurable. They lost their mother to a barbaric act and their father to a prison cell, all because of a man who chose violence over the reality of a changing life. As we reflect on the calendar of crime for January 1st, we remember Anna Walshe not just as a victim, but as a woman whose life was stolen by the person she should have been able to trust the most. Her story serves as a grim reminder of the darkness that can hide behind a polished facade and the power of digital evidence to bring the truth to light, even when a body is never found. Thanks for watching. Please comment, share, like, and subscribe for future episodes from the Calendar of Crime.